I want to welcome you to the 18th Annual Baltimore Book Festival. I'm Beverly Burke, News Director at WEAA Public Radio at Morgan State University. We are so proud to be a partner as the official media sponsor of the Literary Salon. And here you are.
Yay.
I would like to thank the Baltimore Office of Promotion and the Arts and Mayor Stephanie Rawlings Blake for presenting this free weekend of the literary arts in our city. I would also like to recognize some of the festival's sponsors: the City of Baltimore, the Maryland State Arts Council, Corrigan Sports Enterprises, Baltimore Running Festival, the Baltimore Ravens, and know the score? And Visit Baltimore. WEAA 88.9 FM is the official media sponsor for the Literary Salon. And now I want to introduce you to our esteemed guests. Yes, this is the fun part, especially after reading your books. And I have a 30-year-old daughter, okay, so we're going to get on to this. I am so glad we have the group we have here right now. Meg Cabot is a best-selling author of adult, contemporary, and young adult fiction. Her series, The Princess Diaries, made into a movie starring Anne Hathaway and Julie Andrews in 2001. Her latest novel, The Bride Wore Size 12, comes from her Size 12 is the New Black series. And a New York Times best-selling author, Jennifer Armentrout, J-Lynn, writes across a number of young adult, new adult, and adult genres. Her latest book is entitled Wait for You. Heartthrob. Please join me in welcoming Meg Cabot and Jennifer Armentrout to the Baltimore Book Festival.
Thank you.
And we first have to hear a little bit about each of the books that are out right now.
Well, you should go first alphabetically.
It
depends what name you're using, but...
Jalen, sorry.
Oh. Okay, I'll go first. So, thank you so much for that warm welcome, and it is so wonderful to be here. I love Baltimore. My mom actually lives in Annapolis, so I get here a lot, and thank you for that wonderful... You are fabulous. Thank you. Let's give Beverly a warm welcome, and thanks for that. That was amazing. It's been great. This is my last stop on my Bride Wore Size 12 book tour, and this is probably the best way to end it. This is the fifth book in a series that started in 2005 with a book called Size 12 is Not Fat. Back then, size 12 was the size of the average American woman. Now it's size 14. And this series is about a young lady who works in a 700-bed residence hall, which is the job that I had while I was struggling to get published. I worked in a 700-bed residence hall. That doesn't mean that this is an autobiographical novel, because when I was working there at the dorm, there were no murders. I often wanted to commit murder, but no one actually got killed. And in this book, Heather Wells, who is the heroine, is about to get married to her hot private detective boyfriend. I would also like to add that I never had a hot private detective boyfriend. But she is stumbling on the way to the altar because she does encounter a corpse in the dorm where she works. And so that is what happens. Whether or not she solves the murder, which she has to, or she can't get married, and whether or not she gets married is something you will have to find out by reading The Bride Wore Size 12. I've written about 80 books, and those are just the ones that got published. I have about 100 books that no one ever wanted to publish, starting when I was about 7 with a book called Benny the Puppy. Aww. Thank you, the film rights are still available. So that's a little bit about me. I do think, since we're talking about mother-daughter reads, one of the first books that I wrote that did get published was called The Princess Diaries. And that is a book that a lot of moms and daughters have read. It was made into a movie, so they all went to see the movie, and then they went out and bought the book, and the movie was rated G, and the book is rated PG. So one thing you have to look out for when you're buying a book to read as a mom and daughter is sometimes you want to check and see if there's French kissing in the book that might not have been in the movie. And then don't write the author a mean letter. after you find out that there's French kissing in the book and say, how come there's French kissing in the book and not the movie? It's not the author's fault. Okay? And now I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer.
I just want to say that I do have a hot police officer husband, so I just want to throw that out there.
Yeah, so it's so
I
easy
feel like
for
I could be in your book maybe a little bit. I have to go back a couple
It's so easy for you to check the facts when you're writing. You can just say, honey.
No, it's really
if
awkward.
you found a corpse.
Yeah, I call him I write like Meg. I write across multiple genres. I write paranormal, fantasy, contemporary, and thriller. And for a book coming out next year, I had to look up all these murder laws. So I called him up on the phone while he's working. I was like, so if you murdered someone, and like it gets really quiet, and he's like, why? And I'm like, well, I'm just doing some research. But the book I'm talking about today is Wait For You. It is underneath my pen name, Jaylyn. For those who know me, I really don't kind of differentiate between the names. Usually my readers tend to point out when I'm under Jaylyn, when I'm supposed to be underneath a different name. Wait For You is actually called a new adult book. How many people in here don't know what a new adult book is? That's totally okay. I'm going to educate you. A new adult book typically takes place during the college years. So it takes place after high school. And usually your characters are between the ages of 18 and 25. New adult kind of like broke out on the scene, I would say probably 2 years ago, roughly. And it has gained a lot of steam because how many books can you think about that have characters that are in that age group or in college or just getting their first job, experiencing life on their own for the first time? So you will definitely see that kind of theme in new adult where you're experiencing life without the safety net of your parents to fall back on if you mess up. The great thing I think about with new adult is I know when I was in college and I look back and I'm thinking, holy crap, how did I walk out of college, with all my toes and fingers and sanity? And, it's really great. These books do get to explore this. This actually takes place at Shepherd University. Do you guys familiar with Shepherd? Come on, guys. West Virginia is not that far from Baltimore. I know you think it's like way over the mountain. It's really not. But Shepherd University is in Shepherdstown, West Virginia, which is near Harper's Ferry. That sound familiar? Okay. Know your history. And it features Avery, and she is kind of moving across country to kind of escape her teenage years, and she meets a guy named Cam who likes to bake cookies and has a pet turtle named Raphael. I used to have a pet turtle myself named Michelangelo, so that's where I got that from. I just need 3 more. Like Meg, my other series, my YA series, the Lux series, has been optioned for film, and my Covenant series has been optioned for TV. So yes, I'm like Meg. If you don't like something in the movie, do not email me. I have no control over that.
It's true.
It's true. We don't. But I'm really excited to talk about this today, and I hope you guys enjoy.
Now, I think an interesting thing is that your characters go see my character who works in the dorm. If they have any problems, she could probably help them. If they're dorm-related or college-related problem, because she's a little bit older than they are. And also, I thought of something else brilliant that I was going to say. Also, can I call your husband when I have questions about murder? Although,
just don't tell him why.
Don't tell him
I like
why.
to spring that on him every so often. He gets really concerned. He's like, do I need to call my chief?
Right. My brother's a police officer in Denver, and I often call him with questions. And I say, so if you found a corpse in the elevator, and he goes, okay, number 1, if you find a corpse in the elevator, call 911. Don't try to solve the crime yourself. I'm sure your husband would say the same thing. So that's an important part.
That or do I need a lawyer?
Yeah. An important part of the crime-solving process is don't try to solve the crime yourself, people.
I'd like to kind of get you guys into, you both have these automatic stages in college. Now, you know how colleges are. They come with supporting actors, okay, so to speak, the friends on either side. And those casts really are very interesting, the way they were set up in each of your stories. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I think the funniest thing is about secondary characters to an author, at least me, is the characters I never think of are the ones that readers become their favorite, like Ollie. I have gotten so many requests for an Ollie story. And I'm like, why him? I mean, all he does is just mess with the turtle and tries to put like a leash on it. I mean, that's the extent of his presence sometimes. And I think the supporting cast really set up your main cast. You know, they're there to kind of yin and yang sometimes, to also play off. It's almost like a sitcom where you have that character who kind of just, you know, walks into the room every so often, says something, then walks back out, and that's everyone's favorite character. So that's how I look at it. It's kind of like they support the main cast.
The secondary characters often set up the humor. So in this particular book, because Heather is getting married, she has a lot of interactions with her in-laws, including her husband-to-be's twin sisters, who get very involved in, they're going to be bridesmaids, because sometimes you have to make your in-laws to be your bridesmaids, unless you elope like I did, which is sometimes what you might want to do. Not to say anything bad about my in-laws. Are you recording this? That's great.
Yes.
Okay. So his twin sisters become very interfering, and they start inviting people to the wedding because they feel bad for Heather, because she doesn't have that many people coming on her side on purpose. Because there's a lot of people she doesn't want to invite, like her mother, Heather actually was a teen pop star, and then she gained some weight, and her recording company dropped her, and her mother stole all of her money that she made as a teenager. So she doesn't want her mother to come to her wedding. But then her husband-to-be sisters invite her mother, and her mother shows up. So these are all supporting characters that are kind of complicating the plot, which is already complicated because there's a murder. And, you know, we also have, of course, the police officers who are involved, and many of the other characters who are, you know, residents of the hall, and not to mention workers in the residence hall. So these are all, they add sometimes comic aspects, but also they could be potential suspects when you're writing a murder that's also got a romance and a lot of comedy. So, you know, that they're important.
Yeah, they are, because, you know, they're instigators in many instances, and at the same time, the banter that goes back and forth, those conversations, those arguments that go back and forth, you begin to suspect who is really guilty here and what is going on. I found that very exciting. Very exciting. I did. And it's fast-paced. Very fast-paced. I mean,
it's fast-paced in this book. I think it's hot.
It's
in her book.
And quite descriptive.
There's a little hot in this,
Yes,
but
hot.
there's a lot
There's
of hot.
detail.
Yeah, there's some scary and hot in mine. There's a lot of hot, sizzling hot in that. She's too embarrassed to say anything now.
One of the things I was talking about, the book festival is a wonderful time to fill out your holiday lists of gift giving. And so the beauty of your books is that you're hitting the conversation to come between two generations. Let's talk about that.
Well, yeah, I think that you can get the whole series kind of for a lot of people on your list. I always say that my books are attractive to people from 8 to 108 because I've got readers that age. Because, you know, you've got the adult books, and I'm sure that's true of you too, Jennifer. Because, you know, I do have some 8-year-olds who they don't read necessarily these books, although sometimes they do.
That would be interesting.
No, it happens. I actually had a reader in France who came up to me, and she was not reading this book. She was reading one I wrote called Abandon. I don't know if anybody here has read that. And it's a teen book.
I love that book, by the way, if you guys haven't read that.
It's quite hot. It's a teen book about a girl
is.
who gets sucked into the underworld, and she starts making out with the teen lord of the underworld. And she came up to me, and she said she'd already read it, and she goes, "There is not enough kissing in this book." And I was like, "You're 9. What's happening in France? I'm not sure." But yeah, so there's a little something for everyone, I think. Some of whom are more sophisticated than, maybe the 9-year-olds are more sophisticated at this point than the 109-year-olds. I'm not sure.
Well, I think that's the great thing about young adult, new adult, and some of the adult that you read. It has such great crossover appeal. I was speaking on another panel, and I was explaining this email that I got last week was from 2 71-year-old sisters who were reading my book, and so were their daughters and their granddaughters. And I thought that was the greatest thing ever. It's 3 generations reading the new adult and the young adult. So yes, there's a lot of crossover. And I think that's what's so great is that you can hand the book off to your daughter or to your mom. And we were speaking earlier, I think it's really with the Twilight is probably one of the first books that you can go back to that mothers and daughters started reading at a large scale at the same time. And I think because of the acceptance of young adult into the adult world, because beforehand, people would be like, what are you reading? Ulysses Grant. A romance, you hide the cup. Thank God for Kindles, right? Or Nooks, because you have like this guy who's all like, what up? On your cover, and you would be like, I'm not reading that at all. So I think with that too, with the digital age, believe it or not, I do think that has a play in it because no one knows what you're reading in your hands.
How many have e-readers? Whoa, wow. Did we hit a nerve? Okay, technology moves ahead. But this is really where the momentum sort of takes off and the conversation gets going. So what's happening in that conversation? What kinds of exchanges are allowed to go on now that we're reading the same material and it's your daughter or your granddaughter?
Right.
I don't know if I should I'm like looking at the age group here. In the email from the 71-year-old sisters, they got into great detail about the smexy scenes in this book. Like, I mean, great detail. Like, they took notes on the scenes. Whoa. And I was kind of like, whoa. I was like, Grandma, what you doing? And so, I think it really is opening up the discussion, which I think is great because there needs to be that discussion between mothers and daughters. And there needs to be that comfortable enough to really talk about these things. And I think it opens the door for personal life and real life to do that. So they are talking even about the kind of stuff that, looking back at my age, I grew up reading historical romance. My mom knew I was reading it. I got it from her. But oh my God, I would never talk to her about it. So I'm happy to hear that is happening.
And it's interesting, I already talked about this at a previous event, but I used to write historical romances, very, very smexy. I'll say, I like that word, smexy.
Bouncy.
They were very, under another name, because I didn't want my grandma to find out, because I thought she was very, very conservative Catholic, and oh my God, I thought if she found out, she would have a heart attack and die, is what I didn't
know you wrote historicals underneath the name.
No, it's a big secret.
Am I the only one who doesn't know this?
Most people don't know it. So guess who found out before you? Grandma. Oh my God, Grandma found out. And I was like, oh, that's it. She's going to die. Got to go to the ICU, see Grandma. No. Grandma threw a huge book party for me.
Whoa.
In Denver and invited all her nun friends from the church. And I'm like, oh my God, they obviously haven't read them. So I go, and they'd read them, and they loved them, and they were coming up, and like Sister Mary Catherine was like, oh, could you sign this to Father Joe? He's a big fan too. And I'm like,
at this point, I'd be so uncomfortable.
This book, like An Improper Proposal was one of them, and I was dying, and they loved them. They were my biggest fans. Fortunately, I didn't have to put up with that too long, because then The Princess Diaries came out, and I was now, not that there's anything wrong with that. It was making me a little uncomfortable, because there were some books where I was kind of pushing the envelope with the, they didn't use birth control back then in the 1850s that I was writing about, and so I was a little worried that some of the younger readers might discover them, which is why they were under another name. And now my publisher's like, we want to reprint them under your real name, and I'm like, no, because what if they, start doing what they're doing in that book with no birth control? No, that's the story. But it did open up a lovely dialogue between me and Grandma, who it turns out had done all those things.
The opportunity to open up dialogue does two things, okay? First of all, it explodes some myths about what is really, a boundary. And then at the same time, when you have that opportunity to cross the boundary, you discover that, you really can share, and then that opening gives you the entree to go further.
But you may not want to share, so that's just, no, you do. It's good.
Sharing is caring.
Let me find out quickly some about your writing habits. In terms of, is there a room? Is there a vacation you take? Is there special paper? Is there, what becomes your habit? The thing that puts you in your mode for writing?
I'm not very picky. The only main thing I do have is I cannot write around other people. So I'm so jealous of the authors who go on writers' retreats. And I'm like, I want to go, but I'm going to be the annoying author. It's like, hi, can we talk? I know you're writing, but I can't write right now because you're staring at me. And, and then you see these pictures and everyone's like on their little Macs. And I'm like, that's not happening. But I can't be around other people. If someone walks in the room or someone comes up and sits next to me, I stop. And then I always, I don't want them to think that they're bothering me. It's just I can't write when someone's in the room. So that's really the only writing thing I have. I have been making myself write in my office and my house. I'm a couch writer, so I'm like, I gotta stop doing that. So I've been using my office more lately. I feel proud about that, so I thought I'd share that.
That's good. I never thought of that. I don't write with other people too, but there is like a huge kind of group now of writers who they all go to cafes.
And they go to these beautiful places too.
Yeah.
Like they'll go to these mountain resorts, and I'm like, oh.
I never thought of that as like a quirk. It seems to be more normal that writers sit by themselves, isolated from all humanity. I thought that was the normal way to be. I think it's weird now that that's not normal, because that's what I do. And then I had a great writing teacher. Actually, it was my 8th grade English teacher. And he said that the one thing you need to do also is to never have a window, never look out the window while you're writing, because you'll be distracted by the wonderful people having a life. Because you're not going to have a life if you're a writer. So always like pull down the shades and just sit in isolation in your room by yourself.
Be my friend.
Yeah. So that's what I do. I don't ever look out the window. I actually sit with like the shades drawn in the dark.
But that's a good idea, because my office is in the front of the house, and I'll be writing, and then I just find myself.
No, that's what he said. Never look out the window.
People walking by, and I'm
put
just staring at them like the creeper in the house.
That's how you're supposed to be.
Get off my lawn.
You think it's time to take some questions maybe from the audience?
We are going to do that. My last question to you actually is the options on your material. When that happened, tell us about when you get the word that production is going to be starting, and what was that like for you? What did you do when you got the news?
Well, I think it may be different for everyone, but it's such a drawn-out process. Like from the first time your film agent calls you, and because you do, like basically Hollywood reads every single book that comes out pretty much, and you get interest nonstop all day, every day. And 99% of the time, it doesn't go anywhere. So from the first moment they call you and they're like, we're not joking around, they are interested in this, and they're going to be calling you to talk to you. One thing I've learned is in Hollywood, they never meet your first call. They always miss it because they're apparently very busy. So I know never to expect that. And then you get on the phone, and sometimes, a lot of actors now are screenwriters. And you realize who they are. Yes, my last screen. Yes, I had to talk to, and I was like, "I've seen the movie you were in." Yay! I was like, "Keep it cool." But it's kind of like a surreal experience. But I try not to think about it because there's so many things that can go wrong in the whole process. Not to mention, it's just the whole. You want your readers to be happy with the finished product. And you never know what they're really going to change until they hand you the script. And sometimes they don't give the authors the script to read. They're just pretty much like, go see the movie when it comes out.
No, they don't want to give you the script because they know you're going to freak out.
Yeah, when you start seeing the tweaks that they've done and things like that. But it's a very surreal experience when they start talking about what changes they're going to make and who they're looking at for casting. And it's just very, very interesting. But see, she's gone the whole way. So
yeah. So Ernest Hemingway has a great quote. You know this one, don't you? It's and the quote is, "When you sell your movie rights to Hollywood, drive to the border of California with your manuscript, drop it over the border." Get the check and drive away as fast as you can.
Oh my God, that's so true.
And then never see the movie that they make. because you're never gonna like it. Now that said, I did enjoy The Princess Diaries immensely. I thought it was the best movie I ever saw. I was sitting there when I went to the premiere. I was sitting there in the audience with Julie Andrews and all those people, and I was just like, they made a movie out of something I wrote. I can't. This is hilarious to me. And then when they actually started that guy, I don't know if you've seen the movie, but there's a part where this guy stands up and he starts singing the Genovian national anthem. And Genovia is a country that I made up. And it hit me, they paid money to someone to write the national anthem of a country I made up. Genovia is actually now, it's a country on Wikipedia. So, and kids write to me and they're like, I need to know the facts about Genovia. I need to know what the national distribution of Genovia is. I'm like, yeah, it's made up. I made it up, kid. But I just started laughing so hard when that guy started singing that national anthem, and the guy was sitting in my row. And that was a very serious part of the movie, so they did not appreciate me laughing. His whole family was very upset. But so it was a great experience, and I got to meet Anne Hathaway, who is now a huge star.
Isn't that crazy? I mean, do you think about it? Because she was so young,
I know.
and
yeah,
now she's like
before.
hosting Oscars.
And she's great, and she actually read the books on tape, like the first 3 books of The Princess Diaries on tape, and which was so sweet. And I got to see her in the little studio where they read the books on tape, which I don't know if you're a person who listens to books on tape. They are sitting in like a booth that's literally this big, and they're talking into a microphone, and they do that for hours. They have to read every word you wrote, obviously, but that really never occurred to me. I was like, well, you could just like skip some of those words because that seems really hard, but no, they don't let them do that. And so it was adorable, but. You really just don't have any control over what they do or who they cast, unless you're like Stephanie Meyer, who becomes a producer of the movie, or J.K. Rowling. But when you're just in the beginning stages, you don't have any control of that. And you just have to be happy that that movie is going to sell more copies of this book that you wrote. That makes you so happy because people are going to come up to you and be like, oh my gosh, I loved that movie, and I went and I bought your book, and now I read books because I never read books before. That's what happened to me, and that's been fantastic. So I'm just really grateful, and I know you will feel the same way.
And I think it's just an honor. I mean, it really is. And some people
you have to have a good attitude about
and
it.
they do. And
don't be like Ernest Hemingway.
Hey, no, like just run away. I'm gonna be like, yay, that's me.
Be like, I love this movie so much.
Get like a license plate that says. I made a movie.
We're going to grab some questions from the audience now, and Courtney has, yes, the mic is right here.
So I always sort of wondered how you felt about the casting of Julie Andrews, because she's sort of like the exact opposite of the actual character.
I was still working actually at the residence hall when they optioned the movie, and then they started calling me, and nobody knows this, but it was actually Whitney Houston that optioned that movie. Obviously a long time ago, before things happened. But this is being recorded. So I would get these calls, and I didn't even believe this was going to happen because it's like you said, like you get so many calls, and you're like, sure, you're making a movie, whatever, because the money doesn't come for a really long time. So I was like, I get this call, and they go, yeah, so we're making the movie. I'm like, sure. And then they go, okay, so Julie Andrews is going to be in it, and I'm like, right. And then they said, so we're gonna, and I don't think they told me who she was gonna play. So they go, so we're gonna kill a major character from your book, and that's the father. And I was like, oh my God, why? Like, what did he do? And they go, well, we're gonna have her play the grandmother, and then we're gonna give her all the dead dad's lines to raise the stakes so that Princess Mia really has to take the throne. And I was like, Julie Andrews, wait, seriously? Julie Andrews is going to be in this movie? And they were like, yeah, no, she's really going to be in it. And I was like, kill the dad. Do it. Who else do you want to kill? Kill them all. I love Julie Andrews. I was like, am I going to get to meet her? And they're like, sure, yeah, you can come out and meet her. And so I did. And she's just the nicest, you're right. I mean, she's the nicest person, and she was totally wrong. I thought that they should get a man to play the grandmother and in drag. I thought that would be the best thing, but that's why
This
I'm
is
not.
why she's not a director.
This is why we're not the director. Like, they don't listen. The writers have these crazy suggestions. I was like, Mandy Moore should play Princess Mia, and I don't know who this Anne Hathaway is. No, just get rid of her. And so they were like, no, you need to stay at the desk in the dorm and not come to Hollywood. And so then, of course, I was completely wrong, and the whole thing was fabulous. But I thought she did a great job. Obviously, yeah, the grandmother's really mean in the books and should have been played by a man. No, she was perfect. Julie Andrews is wonderful. She's a lovely lady.
Was something you said reminded me of the first call I had with the production people, and they were talking about what they were going to do, and they were feeling me out because some authors can be very controlling during, and we have like this, I'm going to see how crazy you are phone call, and it's the first call. It's like they're feeling you out. They're like, do we really want to go here? And I was like, and of course the first book is Obsidian. It's about aliens, and aliens in high school, and they're hot aliens. But I was like so just excited, and I said to them on the phone, and these people probably thought I'm getting off the phone now. I was like, you can put Megatron in the middle of the movie, and I would not care. Break out the Transformers if that's gonna help. I'm a fan of Bumblebee, and there was just silence.
I'm sure they loved you. I'm sure they loved that.
But I was on speakerphone, and suddenly I hear this guy who I didn't even know was even a part of this going, great. Nice to meet you.
The rights to those belong to another studio.
Another question from our audience.
You talk a lot about the Princess Diaries adaptation. How did you feel about the Avalon High one?
This is a very movie-oriented crowd. I did not, like Jennifer said, they don't send you the script because they don't want you to know anything. And so they did tell me that the script of Avalon High, which is a book I wrote, and it's set here. It's actually set in Annapolis, and it's about a girl who is going to high school, and she discovers that many of the people in the high school are perhaps reincarnations of King Arthur and Camelot, which could happen.
And there's aliens in high school.
Yeah, there's aliens. There's underworld under your high school. You don't know. So Disney made a movie of it, and they decided to change who one of the characters was actually the reincarnation of. And then at the end, funny you mentioned Transformers. She turns into a Transformer, thing, and that was not how the book ends. So it was a surprise to me because they did not send me the script for obvious reasons. But she becomes very empowered, which was good because the screenwriter did write to me. She said, they changed the ending, but it's good because it's all about female empowerment. And I was like, awesome. So I was watching it with everybody else, and I was a little surprised by that choice of the Transformer, but it's not perhaps a choice I would have made visually. But Jennifer would have liked it, I think.
Yes.
And you know what? Like I said, it made a lot of people go out and read the book who had never read it before, so I am wholly supportive. Perhaps not a choice I would have made again, but all for the good of reading and literacy.
Hi. You've been talking about young adult movie or literature genre, but yours are more than just young adult. You've got romance, you've got mystery, you've got, very, very funny. I think what I like the most about it is that how funny there are. So is there a special designation for young adult romance funny novels with mystery?
I don't know. I think that's a good question. To me, and I think your books are very funny too.
Yes.
That
sounds kind of like here. Yes, they are.
I mean, they're not. No, but it's a fact. I think that I personally like humor in my fiction when I read it, and I think it's important to have, because sometimes the themes of both our books are pretty serious, and you need a little levity to make the reader kind of continue along, because if it was all just these murders, for instance, interesting that I said the word murder and an ambulance went by. But your heroine is facing some serious backstory and stuff happens. And yeah, you have a lot of levity, not a lot of levity, but you have some comedic lines and stuff.
And all my genres I write in, the same with yours, there's always humor because it's the Buffy, the vampire slayer aspect. How Buffy would be fighting the Dark Master or whatever, and she still was cracking jokes. It helps it helps lessen the severity of what's happening, I think.
Now that you mentioned that your husband is a police officer, I wonder how much of that might be a little bit of gallows humor because
they have
you
the worst
need
humor.
that when you're facing something so horrible just to go on. But I don't know if there's like a distinct genre name for that. For what we do, there should be.
Honestly, I think what they really do call it is voice of the character. No, not really. No, it's the voice. Like you'll have a character who can be very snarky and very funny, so I think that's what they would categorize as the voice of the character, which is very popular in YA and new adult and younger adult contemporary.
But there are some books in both YA and those other ones that are just so dark all the time, and there's not. So, I don't know what those are called.
I don't read books like that.
No, we don't. I don't think we read those, but we're not saying anything bad about them either, because some people really enjoy those. But sometimes it is kind of. I've been on panels like this where you end up with an author like that whose book is about something super duper serious, and then I'm talking about like the Princess Diaries, and I'm like, oh God, I got put on the wrong panel. Yes. It's a little awkward. They're like, Susie's bad summer, and it's like, what? I'm like, what happened to Susie? And then I find out, and I'm like, oh my God, Susie had a really bad summer. My girl just turned out to be a princess, and Susie woohoo. So we won't talk about it, but it happens. Yeah.
Next question.
I had a question about the audiobooks. So obviously not movies, but do you have control over that at all? Like as far as narrators go, and do you listen to them? Because I know I've already actually talked to Jennifer about this, about how they mispronounce.
Oh my God, yes. They mispronounce the character's name
and it's
in one of the books. It's all the books, yeah. And trust me, I've got those emails like a million times. They're saying your character's name's wrong, and that West Virginia accent sucks. I'm like, I agree. We don't all sound like this. I didn't get a choice in that, believe it or not, but on my Tempting the Player book and on my Way For You, they actually sent me options, and I got to go listen to them do this sample, and one of them was the one who does Sookie Stackhouse's books, and then but I actually went with a guy narrator because it was like I was like, a guy narrating romance, I have to do this and he's on HGTV on top of it, so he's like reading the dirty parts, and I was like, that's funny. But I don't know about you, but I cannot listen to them read my books. I can't do it because I am like, who thought that was a good idea? Like, why didn't they edit out that line? Because you hear some things out loud and you're like, oh no. So, but we do sometimes get a say, but you never know how it's really going to turn out, I think, until you listen to it.
Everything she said. It's sometimes they give you a choice. I never want to hear anything that I've read out loud by anyone except for me, and they never ask me to do it, and I'm like, why? I would do such a good job, in my own opinion, and they're like, no, probably not. And actually, there are people who are paid to do this, so you're depriving them of their income, and that's bad. You should not do that. And also, sometimes they will, call me and ask me how to pronounce stuff. So that has happened.
In my situation.
But that is bad. And but the actresses and actresses actually do a really good job. It's just me. I'm the only one who thinks it's bad because I can only hear it in my own voice. They do a great job, and it's wonderful that this is a source of employment. And the books are really, really important. I have a lot of dyslexic readers. For some reason, do you too? I don't.
Yes.
Yeah. So I don't. Sorry, but I don't know. And it really helps them to hear the book as they read along, which is why they don't like it when I say, well, you don't have to read the whole thing. Just take out the parts, because I hear it too. And I'm like, oh no, can I just revise that part? They're like, no, it has to be exactly the way it was in the book so they can read along. So that's why.
Yeah, and I would totally be okay with them changing things, because sometimes the way it's written does not translate out loud.
It doesn't flow, yeah.
And this is going to be my perfect example is the Lion and the Lamb from Twilight. In the book, it was the coolest thing. It's silly lion or whatever, or silly lamb. But hearing it out loud, it was oh no. It's at least for me. So and there's many lines in my books like that. I'm like, oh, it sounds so cool. But you hear it out loud, you're like.
That's why that's another thing my 8th grade writing teacher said to me was that you should read out loud everything that you've written before, you hand it into your publisher, but this is long. And those actors have a lot of stamina to sit there and read the whole thing out loud. So now I try to be conscious of that, and I do try to read it out loud to see how stupid it sounds. So this one, not stupid at all. I can't guarantee.
Next question.
I'd really love to hear about writing across genres, how you write differently, and probably more interestingly, how you write similarly.
You know, I want to know. Actually, it's not very different for me. And I think the reason being is because I call my young adult, I actually call it upper YA. I don't know if that's an actual real term or not, but you're usually have characters that are 17 and 18. And so it's not hard for me to make the jump into new adult, and then from new adult, make the jump into adult. New adult and YA have a very similar voice. But they're typically dealing with more mature issues. And like I said earlier, like finding their first job, their first real love, their first real heartbreak, where it's not like 16 and, 3 months later, you truly are over it and you found someone else to look at in class and stuff like that. But I think the interesting thing that for me is I write contemporary and paranormal or fantasy. And I cannot write 2 contemporary books back to back at all. So, and I can't edit 2 contemporary books. So I have it spaced out that when I finish a paranormal, I jump into contemporary. Then when I finish a contemporary, I jump back into paranormal. And I think it helps keep it fresh for me. But I kind of try to have when I say not the same voice, obviously, but I like to have the witty, the kind of snarky characters who, even if it's not the main character, it's a secondary character who, like you said, is the comic relief. Yeah. But I have to switch off. And I think it keeps it fresh for me, and I don't get burned out doing something so much.
I like doing events with you because you just answer the questions for me, and then I don't have to say it, because that's exactly how I feel. I think it's, I like to do a mystery where somebody gets murdered, and it's kind of all about how do we solve this horrible injustice to humanity, but also there's a romance, and maybe someone gets married, and then, then there's a teen thing where probably the worst thing, it could be the underworld. It turns out to be somebody under somebody's high school, and does she get the guy or not, or does she have a curfew, which you don't have in adult books, which makes it very refreshing.
Or in the underworld, I don't think there's
There's
one.
no curfew in the underworld, but you may have to stay there for the rest of your life. And then I do like to do middle grade, which are kind of books for younger kids, where the biggest problem is you don't want to kiss a boy at recess, and the mean girl's trying to make you. I love that, because that's a problem. I get a lot of letters from little girls who are like, can you please write another book about fighting with the mean girl? Apparently there's a lot of that going on in 4th grade. It's a problem. Huge.
Question right here.
Here's another movie-oriented question. How did you feel about Mia and Michael breaking up in the second movie?
How did I feel about Mia and Michael breaking up in the second movie? I was mad. I was mad as hell. I don't mind mentioning it. I was like, what's going on? This second movie didn't follow the books at all. They just went off on their own way, but then I got a big check. And I gotta be honest with you, that made me a little less mad.
And the prince was hot.
That prince guy, wasn't he in Star Trek too? Yes. Yeah, I enjoyed that very much. It made me a little less mad.
I was down for it when I saw him.
I tell people, you know what, there's 2 Princess Diaries universes. There's Disney's Princess Diaries universe, which is very nice. It's lovely. And then there's my Princess Diaries universe, which is the right one. So just stick with mine. Enjoy theirs. It's very nice. But stick with mine for the right actual history of Genovia. Okay? Just handle it that way. I know you didn't get the check, and I did, but just you'll be fine. We'll all be fine. Stick together.
Questions up back here.
So you touched on this a little bit earlier about mothers and daughters and controversial issues. How much do you feel as sort of a herald for controversial issues? I know that LGBT is coming into a lot of YA novels, and how do you feel about being somebody who is that how you view your role as someone who kind of introduces topics into the conversation between mothers and daughters?
No, and I think the reason that's for your own sanity as an author, I think, and that's just my opinion, because reading is so subjective. People see messages where you never intended there to be a message, and then when you do have a message, no one gets it. And they're like, the guy was hot, and that's the extent of it. And so you're just like, meh, I'm going home. But I do think it's important, especially in young adult, for there to be books that do talk about these things, because so many teenagers, are going through like issues of sexuality or bad home lives. Recently, Eleanor and Park, which is a book by Rainbow Rowell, am I saying her name right? It was banned simply because it showed an unsavory home life. And, it was banned in certain states. And it's like, and I think those books are very important to get out into someone's hands, because there are teenagers living through that. And then in the new adult world, there are teenagers moving and going away to college who had dealt with these issues as a teenager that are still dealing with these issues. So I have gotten emails in Wait for You. Avery, the main character, did suffer a pretty traumatic event in her teenage life that kind of shaped her several years afterwards. And I have gotten emails from people, and I was really worried about this book being what they call a trigger book, because certain issues will trigger, things that you've experienced. But I did get several emails from people who were really grateful that they picked up the book, because ultimately all my books have a happily ever after, because I want that. They may have to work for it, and it may be hard to get to, but it made them feel normal again. And that was the best emails I have ever gotten, knowing that something that, not that I didn't put a lot of thought into it, because I did, but just really didn't think of it that way, that someone picked up and they were like, you know what, I can be Avery years down the road and have a normal relationship and have fun and do stupid things. And that's very, very important, I think.
That's a really good answer. And I agree that it's not necessarily our job. Our job, I consider my job to entertain, and also to make people who are in a terrible situation like that, kind of pull them out of that, so that they're not thinking about what's happening. Maybe they're in like a hospital waiting room. Yeah, that's Avery letting you know that was a good answer. So that their own life doesn't seem as bad. But I think it is important. For instance, I don't want them to re-release my 1850 novels under my real name, just because I do kind of not want people to use those as, especially my 9-year-old readers, to be like, yahoo! And you write under 2 different names, and I think that's important. In this book, there's an opening scene where the heroine, Heather, is dealing with a mom who's very upset because her daughter has a roommate who she considers to be a slut, is what she calls her, because she hasn't been home in a few nights, and she thinks that she's been out with a bunch of different guys. And so that's right away you start with an issue that this particular mother is judging, and that's kind of a hot button issue, especially when you're away at college and suddenly the mom, what is she like getting all involved for? She's supposed to have dropped her kid off at college, and the kid's starting her new life, and that leads to what eventually ends up being a murder mystery. So I do kind of touch on issues like that, and especially since it's set in a dorm, there is a lot of kind of sexual issues. But the characters deal with them in what I consider a rational way the way they should be dealt with. And I think that we try to be responsible. We're certainly not setting out there to...
You have to take into consideration, if you're writing a touchy subject, you do have to think about it, because
that people may misinterpret
someone's going to
them.
read that.
Yeah, and I got a letter. I remember when Princess Diaries first came out, the grandmother smokes. And she's not a good role model. She's not supposed to be a good role model. But I got a very angry letter from a mom who's like, why do you show this woman smoking? That's a terrible example for kids. And I'm like, are you kidding me? She's not supposed to be a good example. She's a bad example. So people do misinterpret things all the time. Anyway, there's nothing you can do. And she gave me 1 star on Amazon. I was so mad. I'm like, really?
We have another question back here.
You've spoken a lot about your teacher. Well, I teach a creative writing class, and I am wondering what lessons you think are most crucial for young aspiring writers who just love to write. And along those lines, one of the questions that students ask me is, how do you know how the story is going to end? Do you know how it's going to end when you begin, or are you figuring it out on the way?
Thank you for coming. And also, then thank you for doing what you do, because my teachers really, really influenced me and were very supportive, and I probably wouldn't be here without my fantastic teachers and also my fantastic school librarians. So yeah, I think a really good lesson that teachers and creative writing teachers especially can give is don't give up. So if you are writing and you are sending your stories out and you're getting rejected, hope people still get rejected. I don't know. I went through so many rejections. I really want other people to get
Yes, people still
Thank
get
you.
rejected.
Okay. Not that I want mean things to happen, but, it's very, very character building. And the question about do you know the ending before you start? I don't start a story unless I know the ending. So I don't know if everybody's that way, but I consider it like you're buying a ticket to a trip. So obviously when you buy the ticket, you know where you're going. I don't know exactly what's going to happen along the way, but you don't necessarily want to know because that's the fun part. I kind of have a few ideas, like maybe a couple hotels that I'm going to stay in along the way, but I don't know exactly what's going to happen. That's just how I write. But I think it's, for me, if I don't know what's going to happen at the end, it's usually pretty easy that she's gonna solve the crime and she hopefully will find happiness with her man. But that's usually about all I know. And maybe I have a couple other details. For me, that's the fun part, is getting there. That's the fun part of going on a trip, getting there. What about you?
I'm the same way. I know where I'm starting the book and I know where I'm ending it, but I usually have no idea what's happening in between. And sometimes I'm surprised that I get to the end and I'm like, holy crap, this all worked out. Yes. Because, it's like an adventure. But sometimes the book can get away from you and your writing can get away from you. So I think for new writers, it's good to really think about that end because that helps them stay on track.
But I think it's really important not to tell anyone the end or tell anyone how you're getting there.
Because if you change it.
Well, not only if you change it, but also I feel like it's told. Like sometimes the story feels like it's told already and then you don't feel like writing it. So I never tell, and it's a superstitious thing with me, I never tell anyone the end, including like even my agent or my editor. I'm just like, so this is a story and it's gonna be about this, but I can't tell you who did it or how it's gonna end. So.
And I think, too, is letting writers write what they want to write and not what they should be writing or need to be writing. I think if it's something they're really passionate about, that's what is going to really get them. If they want to write about vampires, write about vampires. If they want to write about solving murder mysteries, let them. Or princesses or aliens or Greek gods. And because that's where the passion comes in because that's what they want to write.
And we have one other question here.
Hi, I'm a big fan, Meg, and I'm going to definitely pick up your book now. Nowadays, social media is so big, and I know Meg writes blogs, and she's on Twitter and everything. When I was technically YA age, they didn't have that. You had to actually write a letter. Do you find that has changed the way you write? And do you kind of stay off of it after you put out a book so you don't hear all the negative or I know you like to hear the positive, but has that changed anything?
Well, I can answer that because I've been around much longer than she has. And so I remember when there was no kind of social media, there was just, I had a blog and people would email me. So that was all I would get. And there was Amazon. And actually, I think it hasn't really changed what I write. I would say that in this book, there's some social media. The mystery kind of actually revolves around like a social media kind of issue. Because people keep on tweeting and blogging stuff, and she's like, oh my God, and it's constantly changing. So I think that, and also I think that's a source of anxiety for the people we write for. And since they're young people and they live in this book, they live in this storm, they're constantly worried about that. So that becomes a source of intrigue, I should say. But as far as me, I think that for writers, I don't know how Jennifer feels about this, but I think you can end up spending more time on social media than you do on your book, and that's really bad because your job is to be writing your book. And so you need, as much as we love hearing from readers, as much as we would much rather, I think in some cases, be talking to our readers than working on our books because we love our books, but we also are kind of people who maybe procrastinate a bit, some of us.
Oh, yeah.
It's really important that we not be distracted by Pinterest, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. What are the other ones?
WordPress, Blogger.
Oh my God, Goodreads. I mean, there's so much. And so in some cases, we have to, if we have an assistant, we have to turn it over to them. And because it can be overwhelming and take you away from what you're really supposed to be doing, which is crafting new books, which is what we love.
I'm actually working on a contemporary book right now that's YA. And I had to really take in consideration. It's funny because you mentioned in the first chapter about being called a slut because it has something to do with that kind of stuff. And as I started thinking about it, about what it was like for me in high school, and there's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and how horrific that can become for someone. So yes, you do think about that aspect that it has to play a role, but that's it. But Meg is right. You have to be careful about the amount of time you spend because you get sucked in and you start with Twitter and then you end up on BuzzFeed. And for you guys who do not know what BuzzFeed is, stay away from it because your whole entire day is gone because you're like, well, it's like to live in the 90s, click. And then first world cat problems, which is like my favorite.
Kittens kill
kittens
me.
and
Anything
puppy
with
problems,
kittens,
like
I'm
the
gone.
song of my people. And I'm like, this is great.
I had to, at certain points, I will say it's my assistant, I make her change my password and not tell me what it is to everything. So I can't even get on.
I need to do
and
that.
then I have a computer that doesn't even go online because I'm like, I have a deadline, I can't, no.
Well, the funny thing is I will say on Twitter, and I'm sure the people who follow me see this all the time, I'm like, okay, I'm going into hidey hole for a while, and then 10 minutes later, I'm like, look at this supernatural GIF I just found.
But I think, just really quickly, I think you bring up a really good point because we are adults and I can take anything that anybody says bad about me. I don't care, but I can't imagine how you must feel as a teen to see something horrible about yourself. And of course, I'm
the internet isn't anonymous.
Yeah,
and
I
people,
don't care.
they get mouthy.
Because I've been hearing bad stuff about myself since I was 12 and seen stuff written about me on the bathroom wall, and I'm like, oh, she said that. Wait till I grow up and write a book about her. She's gonna regret it. And then, and that happened. But you when you're 12. I guess other people don't have that who are 12. I don't know why I did. So I just can't imagine how that must be. So I feel bad.
It's scary. I mean, because you think about how quickly stuff can spread on social media. That thank God Twitter and Facebook, MySpace wasn't around then because I would have been that kid who probably did something that I should not have done. And there was a picture of it because I'd be like, yeah, take a picture.
I was the gossipy girl who would probably be the one spreading stuff. But I shouldn't say that. But because I just hated those mean girls. And I'd be like, oh, she said that? Well, I'm just going to make up something.
You wrote underneath the stuff like, well, so-and-so is this.
Oh, my. Well, because I make stuff up.
Storyteller. He was like, it spiraled out of control at that point.
Okay, we have to get off this topic now.
Best-selling authors. Meg Cabot has The Bride Who Wore Size 12. And Jalen has Wait for You. And if you have a long gift list for the holidays or birthdays or anything coming up, we want to direct you to our books over here, and they will be standing by to sign them for you.
Yeah. I'll be right there.
Meg Cabot and Jalen, let's give it to them.
Thank you.
Did a tremendous job.
Thank you so much. You guys were great. Thanks.